Let's go over the other side of the desk. We're going to talk about the newspapers now. And Alison Sargent is starting off with talking about three very different women who dominate the papers today. Starting in France, this is the press saluting the American-turned-French entertainer Josephine Baker, of course.
She makes history this Tuesday as the first black woman to enter the Panthéon. The indomitable Josephine Baker, according to L'Humanité on their front page. The paper writes that she was born poor in a segregated United States before she moved to Paris to become the star of the roaring 20s performance scene, a French resistance fighter and a civil rights activist. Communist paper L'Humanité calls her the luminous face of a mixed race, joyous and inclusive France. Now, at the other side of the political spectrum, right-wing paper Le Figaro is hailing Baker as a free French woman. The headline of their editorial here, Osez Josephine, Dare Josephine, is a reference actually to a song by Alain Bachung. Le Figaro writes that Josephine Baker represents France's universalism, a universalism that, according to Le Figaro, is now being criticized as racist and is under threat by, quote, ideas coming from the United States that seek to reduce everyone to their race and their gender.
Yeah, and indeed some American writers you found actually accusing France of racism.
Now, there's an article in the left-wing magazine The Nation that's just the kind of article that would really ruffle the feathers of the editors at Le Figaro. The title here says it all: Giving Josephine Baker a hero's grave won't bury the truth of France's racism. In this article, Gary Young explores the special and complex status given to Black Americans that were living in France at the time. He writes, their racial difference was embraced because the French found themselves neither familiar with nor implicated in the conditions that made their exile necessary. Basically, by welcoming African Americans, France could see itself as sort of a savior from American racism rather than a perpetrator of racism in their own way through colonialism. And he points out in this article that there was actually also a move to put the late French-Tunisian lawyer and rights campaigner Gisèle Halimi in the Pantheon, but that so far has failed because it has been deemed too divisive. Now, American papers are not the only ones pointing out a certain hypocrisy and politicization behind Emmanuel Macron's choice to put Josephine Baker in the Pantheon. In this cartoon by Coco for Libération, we see the French president saluting the values of a great humanist, while behind him we see French forces rather aggressively dismantling a refugee camp.
Woman number two for you now from Alison. Very different woman dominating pages in the UK. This is Ghislaine Maxwell, who went on trial Monday for sex trafficking.
She was allegedly Jeffrey Epstein's second in command. Maxwell is a British socialite, of course, so her trial being covered very much in the British press. Tabloid The Daily Mail quotes the prosecution in their headline here, calling Maxwell a predator who served up young girls to be abused. We can also take a look, Stuart, at the editorial of the Miami Herald. That's the newspaper that published the reports that led to the reopening of the investigation into Epstein's sex trafficking ring. The paper starts their editorial with a single word: finally. Finally, someone stands to be held accountable. They are here, though, reminding us to really put the emphasis on victims. They hope the trial will be a moment of strength and a demonstration of the power of truth for other women in similar situations who have been doubted and dismissed.
And finally, number three, heading to Spain for this woman. Papers there are celebrating a star football player.
Yeah, Barcelona midfielder Alexia Putellas, the 27-year-old, became the first Spanish woman to win France's coveted Ballon d'Or award. Spanish sports paper Marca here hails her triumph as historic. The paper writes that in addition to playing with skill, she is a player that plays with a lot of beauty. She also dedicated her award to her father, who died when she was very young. Now, on top of Marca's front page, you might also notice that nice collage of sort of the evolution of Lionel Messi through the years, because he won the award for a record 7th time. The former Barcelona striker gets equal billing here on the front page of another Spanish sports paper. Their headline here, they're made of gold. French sports paper L'Equipe, though, doesn't get as many points for gender equality. They are focusing solely on Messi. Their headline is a play on words that only works in French, or in franglais, game, set, match.
And finally from Alison, she's following up on one of our most crucial stories of the last few days. She talked about this yesterday. This is this group of people, if you may remember, stranded at a remote pub in the UK by a pretty severe snowstorm.
Yeah, and this is either good news or bad news, depending on how you look at it, Stuart, because they finally have gotten out. As we read in The Guardian, the staff of the inn bid them a very fond farewell on Monday afternoon. That was after 3 nights of revelry, of singing karaoke, doing pub quizzes, singing along to Oasis. Yeah. Now, they may wish they were still stuck. In this cartoon by Patrick Blower, we see them re-entering the world and discovering the Omicron coronavirus variant. And they say, on second thought, maybe let's stay.
It's like Big Brother, but with lots of alcohol involved, isn't it? And Oasis.
And a lot of music, yeah.
Exactly. Thanks, Alison. Alison Sargent summing up the newspapers for us here on France 24.